Peter?
Hey, George.
How are you?
All righty. Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Live on YouTube, just
That's right. Make a good bed. I'm going to talk about
I think we're all set to go.
All right.
So, Peter, so I guess the big news of the day, let me start recording because we don't want to be talking into the ether pointlessly. So I guess, Peter, the big news of the day is Putin's speech and then the very lengthy Q&A that he engaged in at the Valdai Club. And as always with Putin, he always says interesting things. So, you know, he's kind of unable really to say anything boring. And you know, he made very interesting talk about values. I mean, the thrust of it was that you can't impose values, which was very different from the values that Blinken and Biden constantly talk about, and or NATO, you know, our values, which are so important. But he was saying the point about values is you can't impose one set of values onto another. And I think he pointed to the Iraqi and Afghanistan debacles as examples of trying to export a system onto a very alien system. And what happened was a complete failure after 20 years from the United States. So I think he talked about that. He talked about Russia being a very conservative power, that is essentially, it espouses conservative values. And he said, look, if the West wants to embrace wokeism, fine, go ahead. You can get rid of the family, get rid of history, get rid of your tradition. I mean, do it. You know, we in Russia already have experience of that. You know, we had a horrible experience with the Bolsheviks, and we don't want to go down that path. And so everything that we see now about of wokeism is something we've already lived through. So thanks, but no thanks. Anyway, that's just a start off. What do you think, Peter?
It's so interesting you say that, because it's almost impossible for Western media to write a straight story on what he had to say, right. Because first of all, they've demonized him to a person that doesn't even exist. It's cartoonish, okay? And when you start talking about conservative values, they get really, really uncomfortable, because let's face it, 99% of the people that write about Russian Western media are liberals, okay? Right. And so they can't understand him. And obviously they're going to avoid that completely. And so it's going to be comments made about NATO, Ukraine, Georgia, these kind of things. That's what they're going to focus in on, because the rest of it is very, very uncomfortable. Right, exactly. For me, it's very gratifying, because that's what I see on a daily basis, okay? He's reflecting to, or informing a Western audience primarily, what everyday life is like here, which of course, again, is never, ever reported. It's always find a dissident or a tragic story, and tragic things do happen here, of course, but that's not the norm. So for me, it's a breath of fresh air, and it's kind of like me listening to him, and I'm poking all the people that will refuse to write about these things.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, the Western media always have that idée fixe, Putin, Navalny, the dissidents, and so on. But when he expresses himself and he says, look, here in Russia, we went through this horrific turmoil of the Bolshevik rule. Then we went through this horrific turmoil of the 1990s. We aren't interested in woke values because it's all old hat for us. We know the Bolsheviks sort of embraced a very dogmatic version of Marx and Engels, and then said, well, yeah, let's just get rid of everything. We'll start all over again. We'll get rid of families. We'll get rid of history. We'll get rid of statues. And then, hey, we'll have a brand new country and a brand new history. It says, okay, if the West wants to go down this path, I'm not going to do it. We don't impose our values on you, but we don't want this. We've had enough of it. We're up to here with this. So I think that's really goes to the heart of what he's saying. This is why Russia is basically a very conservative country, and really and is afraid of any revolutionary change.
Well, and what even to this day, decades after the Cold War, they still use Cold War terminology when they talk about Russia, which of course, someone like myself living here, it's tone deaf. I mean, don't you recognize anything that has changed here? I mean, over the years, George, and I can't say it's been recently it's happened, but over the years, I've talked to Western journalists, and I've just said, okay, I mean, you can have your critique and all that, but you can't deny the fact that it gets better every single year. I mean, even if you want to agree that it's only incremental, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, and but then again, they just won't focus in on that. Okay, I mean, I don't want to sound boring or anything, but one of the things that I take delight in, when you're sitting on the underground system, they have video screens all over the place. They have cooking, they have commercials, but they have the infomercials for the city. And it shows what they're building, what additional metro station they're building. They're like 25 this year alone, okay? And then how this building has been refurbished and all of that. And they're always telling a story about a city that they love and they are so proud of. And it is so historic, okay? You don't get those kind of things anymore. If you're in Chicago, it's what's wrong with Chicago, okay? And some kind of systemic racism has made this happen. There's nothing like that here, okay?
Right. That's right. Our friend Herman Montoya, who's always joins us, and it's good to see you. He makes the point, a very good point, which is that Putin is starting to critique capitalism because he did that at Valdai. And he says, what did he mean by states shouldn't intervene in the economy? Did he mean companies or big tech? I think what he was saying is that we really don't want like kind of pure capitalism, even if that were possible, or kind of free market. He says that, look, what is the most successful mixture is some kind of state and markets. And I think he particularly referenced the 2008 calamity, when you basically allowed Wall Street just to run rampant, and then everybody had to pay the price. So he said that what the most successful formula is something of a state working together with capital. And he also referenced the response to COVID, that's been the most successful response, government and corporations. And then again, he also referenced China. He said China is a big success story of basically government and industry. So yeah, he's criticizing capitalism, but he's not embracing it. Kind of let's go back to Stalinism.
Well, and also, and again, it kind of is important to understand what happened in the 1990s and then in the first decade of this century, is because in the 1990s, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was just literally the wild, wild west, okay? And a group of very, very cunning, devious, sometimes murderous individuals were able to amass vast resources, okay? Old Soviet factories, real estate, all kinds of buildings and things like this. And the state was so weak, it just really didn't know what to do, or actually it was bought off, okay? And so when Putin came to power, he just said basically, we're not going backwards, we're going to go forward, but there will be no capture of the state by capital.
Yeah.
No, not
Yeah.
that's not how we move forward.
Right.
And so it happened, and we've talked about this before. Putin is a reformer. Remember this when
Right.
after Yeltsin passed the baton, and then when the Yukos affair happened with Khodorkovsky, that's when everything changed.
Yep.
Check the Financial Times. It's literally in 1 week, okay, from reformer to tyrant, and it was because of the Yukos affair. And Khodorkovsky, he wanted to sell this vast conglomerate that he had accumulated, and according to Russian courts, he had done much of it illegally, according to Russian courts. And so Putin said, no, you work for us, okay? I mean, God didn't give you the oil, okay? God gave it to the ground, and it's the people's ground. It's the sovereign state of Russia. And so Khodorkovsky wanted to sell it to some Texans, and Putin said, no, you're not. And that's what we call the oligarch war here, because it sent a message to all the rest of them. You can keep your money, you can keep your assets. You have to pay taxes, and you have to stay out of politics. And that model has worked pretty well.
Right. Well, in other words, those who had gotten the ill-gotten gains from the 90s got to keep their goods. And so what he asked from them is that, pay your taxes and stay the hell out of politics. And those who continued to interfere in politics then got clobbered. But I think he didn't try to take away anything from the people who actually made, I think, unfair gains in the 90s. So that was really the horrible part of it, because after all, that privatization was an absolute disaster. And so everything the Soviet people had sacrificed for, it all fell into private hands. I mean, people like Abramovich and all of those characters. And it was obviously unfair. I mean, it belonged to the people of the Soviet Union, and then how did why are they suddenly in the hands of these fat cats?
And these what were called oligarchs, and I use the term oligarch as a timepiece for a certain amount of time in post-Soviet history, that they threatened government ministers, saying, you fired. Your job is you're in trouble. I got my eye on you. I mean, very, very threatening. Okay,
right.
And even there's some ministers are around now that have told about this in the public, saying that they got threats from this person and that person, and that's when the hammer came down, and everybody knows the score right now. So and as a matter of fact, in 2008, when so many of these quote unquote oligarchs had disastrously got themselves mixed up in the toxic financial system of the West, then everyone's like, oh, we hope Putin will bail them out. He'll take them over. The state will take. I mean, it's like, what narrative are you talking about now?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And that's why it's so laughable when the West, and very deceptively so, when they talk about the Russian system today, they're invariably talking about the oligarchs, or Putin and the oligarchs who are running the show.
No oligarchs anymore.
There aren't any,
No,
and they don't run the show. I mean, it's just, and so all of this attempts to show, well, this so and so, well, this some rich guy, he's close to Putin. Today this week we had Oleg Deripaska. Oh yeah, Oleg Deripaska. Very close to Putin. There's no evidence at all that any of these people are close to Putin, and he has no interest in any of that. I mean, Putin's interest is the economic development of Russia. And he wants Russia to punch its weight. I mean, it is true. Russia should be a big, rich country and should be up in the top 3 or 4 economies in the world. And Russia isn't punching its weight. And I think that Putin does want to address that problem, has from the beginning.
Lobbying happens here too, everybody. Okay, what? So when it's the natural resource people, and they want to export, they want a certain range for the value of the ruble to the dollar, and then you have importers, and they're petitioning as well. We need a softer ruble. We're not competitive and all, and and it's always a constant balancing all of the time. People are always lobbying. They call up this ministry, you need help with. That's what happens everywhere, okay?
Right.
Why it shouldn't happen here is such a mystery to me.
Right. I think that's right. I mean, I think lobbyists are a very bad idea, but
Yeah.
no question, they happen everywhere. So we have a question from Balázs Hetényi, who's a good friend of ours, Hungarian, as you can tell from his name, and he lives in Turkey. And he said, could communism win in the end? After the fall of the USSR, this seemed unlikely. But now with China's rise and Putin's critique, who will have the last laugh? I think that's an interesting question. I mean, but it's hard to think of the system in China as in some way communism. I mean, what we understand by communism is something practiced for a certain time by the Bolsheviks and by Mao at a certain point in his rule. But the peculiar system that the Chinese have today, yes, it's ruled by the CCP. I don't quite see what it has to do with communism.
But see, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it has nothing to do with communism. It is the governing force, organization, the Communist Party of China. But that doesn't necessarily make it very communist, okay? Yeah. It's not Marxist, Leninist.
Right.
I mean, it was what was the phrase? Deng said it. He said, it doesn't matter what color the cat is.
Yeah, Deng Xiaoping, yeah. I don't care whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches.
As long as it catches mice.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always find it jarring, and I'm sure you do too, how like Fox News are always like communist China, CCP. Right. That is just an empty slogan as far as I am concerned. Okay, and it has been that case for a long time.
For a long time, exactly.
Yeah. It's an emotional, evocative thing to say. And of course, it's to conjure up the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Okay, it makes it simpler, and they have to simplify, which of course they've gotten it completely wrong. China is a massive economic challenge to face. The Soviet Union never was for the West.
No, it never was. Big military rival, the Soviet Union, and of course, the space race was a big deal, and the Soviet Union made enormous strides in the space race. I mean, they kind of launched it. That's why they frightened the Americans out of their wits, because of the sudden advances far ahead of the Americans in the space race. So, but in terms of as in economy, no, there was no possibility. But I think it really does raise an interesting issue, because we talked about Fukuyama's famous The End of History, and which was a big deal, and still is. It's a kind of a reference point when people talk about the end of history. Well, because Fukuyama said, well, we've all the big conflicts in the world have been settled, and liberal democracy has prevailed, and no one can challenge it. Well, talk about a doctrine that's dated now, but it was a very big deal in 1989 when he wrote that essay.
I remember it very well, and at the time I thought it was very foolish. I mean, being a historian at the time, history never ends. Okay, I mean, that's a very flippant thing to say, but of course it was it tied to the motif of the end of the Cold War, that we won the Cold War, victory in the Cold War. Right. No, I mean the challenge is the toxic nature of neoliberalism, and that's being shown bare for everyone to see. Okay, I mean, a continued rapid series of economic crises. It continues on and on. Okay, and all of these bubbles that are being created with this quantitative easing. It's not if, it's when.
Right. And Herman Montoya says, well, Chinese economic model is called socialist with Chinese characteristics. Chinese economy is a socialist country. Well, when someone says something like that, I've always got to remind that I think Noam Chomsky, if I can remember how he put it, he said, yes, what we call the socialist democracies, he says, well, everyone always expects, they're socialists, so we call them, socialists because they describe themselves as socialists. But they also describe themselves as democracies. Do we accept that characterization? In other words, we accept that, they're socialists, they're socialists, but they call themselves socialist democracies. We don't accept that they're democracies, so why accept that they're socialists? And I think that's the point. I mean, I think socialism has some connotation of egalitarianism. There has to be some idea there of equality. And I mean, look, the Bolshevik rule also, they got rid of the egalitarianism fairly early on. But I mean, so, and again, that was Lenin, I think, he say something like Soviet power plus electrification equals communism. So, you know, they kind of quickly abandoned all the egalitarian features. But Mao, I think he retained some ideas about egalitarianism. I mean, he launched his Cultural Revolution because I think he wanted, you know, to get rid of the whole hierarchy and elites, you know, and bring some of the old egalitarian ideas of Marxism to the fore. Of course, you know, it was a disaster for China, but I think he still retained some notion of egalitarianism.
Well, but today, and it'll sound interesting for some of our viewers, I hope, because the Chinese talk about, you know, when I ask and I said, you know, what percentage of people are in the middle class? And the reaction was, we're all in the middle class. Right. See, and that's that egalitarian element. And there's also that element of no one left behind. Okay. And so in that sense, it is that, the state and controlled by the Communist Party, you know, that's their social contract. You know, no one left behind. That's why this whole housing scandal in China is such a big deal, because so many people were tied into it with mortgages and all that, and that is a threat to their social contracts, and they take it very, very seriously. And justice in China is hard and swift, okay? Because there is a lot of corruption.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of corruption. Fantastically wealthy. I mean, you know, enormous inequalities there, because you know there are billionaires there who are among the wealthiest individuals in the world. So you know, it's you know, yeah, I mean, it's not that egalitarian, but I mean, you're right. I mean, America had at least an egalitarian idea, because yeah, in the middle class, and you had, you know, the notions of, particularly after World War II, that no one would be left behind. You know, everyone would move in the middle class, so you had all these well-paying jobs. I mean, in the heyday of American industrial dominance, that you know, you basically sort out all your problems of poverty, because there'll be jobs, you know, good, well-paying unionized jobs in Detroit and so on. That's gone, and we're living with the consequences of it. You know, we have you know, people are not making any more money now than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. And you know, that's a really serious problem, because then America really doesn't have any of the egalitarianism that at least it could have espoused back in the 1960s.
Comparing China to the United States is basically a fool's errand, as far as I'm concerned. Having said that, in agreeing with you, what we've seen is the middle class, you know, under siege, shrink, and actually being targeted. Right. Now, you can't say that about China. China has brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. I mean, it's truly an extraordinary achievement. It really is. Okay. Now, if it will be able to continue to do that, that's a totally different question. They have demographic issues here. They have environmental issues that are very, very serious as well. And plus, going back to the social contract that I mentioned, you know, you can only, it can have problems from time to time, but if it is seen to be in the populace sees it in that it's being violated, then you have instability. Okay, right. So you know, it's not a rosy path. Okay, right. It's not. But give credit where credit is due. Hundreds of millions of people over the last few decades have been pulled out of poverty. That is something that's probably never happened on that scale ever.
No, I think that's right. Again, Balázs Hetényi says that was Henry Ford's capitalism. He wanted workers to get paid well, so that they buy what the corporations produce. And that's exactly right. And those were well-paying jobs. And let's keep in mind that, you know, blacks got those jobs as well. And that's when you had a rapid rise of the black middle class, because basically they were getting these jobs in these factories. Once that disappeared, then unfortunately, you had the phenomenon of blacks looking to government for assistance rather than well-paying jobs. You know, if there were enough well-paying jobs, then sooner or later, any kind of friction between whites and blacks would have disappeared. But it didn't happen, and so and I think that's why that model of, I don't know, do you remember that film made in the 1960s, In the Heat of the Night?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very good film.
Yeah.
But I remember what was going on there, which was that there was this white entrepreneur who had moved down into Mississippi, and he was building a factory which would give lots of jobs for blacks. I mean, this entrepreneur is murdered. But the point was that there was a kind of an optimism in the film, which is, well, once you build this factory and there'll be jobs for poor whites, poor blacks, then basically all the friction, racial friction, would just simply disappear. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened, because those jobs have not really materialized as they once did.
Well, I mean, people. We talked about the Trump's voting bloc in 2016 and 2020, and he did. He increased his vote with the black voter, which
Yes.
is really interesting because the last time that happened was 1960 with Nixon, and so they kind of put a layer on what you were just saying here.
Right.
You have the you have to start having you and I remember how unions were demonized, Jimmy Hoffa and all that. They were really demonized in 1970.
Absolutely.
And so what you had is you have the slowdown of the industrialization, and then you have the Great Society, which was also a bribe for the black voting bloc. Okay, and it became under Johnson, where blacks they had a home in the Democratic Party. That was never the case before. Everybody always thinks they vote for Democrat. No, it's in our lifetime, George. In our lifetime, that happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's right. But I think it's interesting what you bring up with Trump, because with Trump, that was his selling point, which is, hey, I'm the guy who knows how to get the economy moving, and I'm going to bring back jobs to the United States. In other words, there will be a return to manufacturing jobs. And I think that's why he suddenly increased his support among blacks and among Hispanics. It was because suddenly he was the person who was promising to bring back jobs. And he did it by a trade policy, and he did it by an immigration policy. The trade policy, which is that, hey, you're shipping jobs overseas, try coming back. We're going to hit you with tariffs. And the immigration policy was obviously, well, we'll have tight labor markets, and suddenly there'll be a labor shortage and price of labor goes up. So I think that's why he was able to break into the black vote. It's going to take a long time, but at least Trump was kind of thinking about how to do it.
Well, and everyone's going to be reminded of it too, because we basically have, with old Joe, we have the third term of Barack Obama. It's got all of the varsity B teamers are there, right. And the same thing. I mean, it's very interesting. We don't know if it's the chicken or the egg thing here, but the New York Times over the last week saying, settle for less. It's time to start settling for less. But that's an echo of Obama years.
That's right.
That's an echo from that administration.
That's right. Exactly. That was very much the echo of the Obama years, which is, hey, these jobs have gone and they're not coming back. Yeah, so they're gone. Which is a very, very pessimistic outlook, because you don't want a president to say, hey, well, it's all gone. Nothing you can do. You want somebody to say, yeah, we're going to bring them back. And that was definitely Trump's message from the beginning. And incidentally, the whole COVID thing only highlighted the extent to which Trump was right, which is, we've shipped these jobs, the supply chain overseas, and now we've got a shortage of all the things that we need.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, and we've talked about this a number of times, but if there isn't a reversal, then it's permanent decline. I'm sorry, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
To be a great nation, you have to build things that people want.
That's
okay?
Right.
It's one definition of a great power, okay?
All right. So we have a super chat from our friend Kevin Dorr, who's always helping us. And he says, I would be more supportive of unions if they weren't puppets for the Dems. I'm amazed the hold Dems have on certain groups that they abuse. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I mean, the teachers' unions, okay? I mean, fundamentally, I am pro-union, okay? But when I see what the teachers' unions are doing, it horrifies me, okay? It really does. And not to be too crass or anything, but these are not the brightest people, okay? And in seeing how much swagger they have within the Democratic Party horrifies me. And they give real unions a real bad name. Look at the people over at Amazon. God help those people. They need unionization. Look what's going on in a number of cities in the United States now. Starbucks doesn't have any unions, but they're trying. And what the tactics that the Starbucks, I mean, the senior executives going into this one cafe and intimidating people. Okay, I am for workers to be able to protect their rights. But when you have these teachers unions that are just way too political, they're not protecting. They're a political arm of the party. Okay, that's what it is, and they do a huge disservice to regular people that can only get ahead if they can organize. Okay.
I think it's a very, very interesting because, there's really no reason for the Democrats and the unions to be joined at the hip. Remember, the Kennedy administration went after Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, it went after him with such vindictiveness. And, whatever the issues there were with the Teamsters, it was driven by personal resentment, because when Robert Kennedy and Hoffa got into a whole to-do when Hoffa was testifying before the McClellan Committee in the 50s, that Bobby Kennedy was absolutely determined to destroy Hoffa. So they went after Hoffa and imprisoned him. But Nixon, he had good relations with the union, so much so that in 1972, and we talked about this before, it was a historic breakthrough. The AFL-CIO refused to endorse George McGovern. I mean, it didn't endorse Nixon, but it refused to endorse McGovern. So what the Republicans need to do is to see, workers as being their allies. I mean, if they're going to be the party of the working class, then be the party of the working class. We're the party of trade deals, we're the party of high wages, and making sure that a labor supply is kept very tight.
Exactly, and we have talked about this with great distress because this is not rocket science, okay? But it's the libertarian streak within the Republican Party, particularly in its leadership. They abhor unions in theory, I mean, and in practice, okay? Right. And it's just a recipe for defeat. The Democrats and their ideology, it's a given, it's a problem, it's toxic, okay? But our concern is what can be, because there is an alternative there's an open lane out there. It's just completely, no one's embracing it. Right. Trump tried to, I think, effectively, not with the greatest amount of precision, and the determination and focus that he should have, and then COVID hit, and then everything got blown out of the water. But the instinct to go for that constituency, it's very, very powerful, and it is multiracial.
Exactly, and I think it's right. And I think that unfortunately, Trump tried to make nice with the Republican Party establishment after having trounced them in the primaries, and having been vindicated, he started making all these appointments. CEOs of giant corporations, the first labor secretary guy, he had been a union buster. There was no reason for this. He could have easily, appoint as labor secretary some union guy. I mean, say, this is my labor secretary. You can easily get an agreement on immigration with a union guy. So absolutely, there's an open lane here. The Democrats have lost it. I mean, they've gone into this whole wokeism, and there's no support for this among the ordinary middle class, working class people. And it's an open door. They've got all those Mitch McConnell Chamber of Commerce types standing in the way.
It's even worse than that, because you've said open door, I've said lane. So I'll continue with the metaphor. They want to shut off that lane, and they want that door slammed closed. Okay, because that's a danger to them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there was also a super chat from, again, a good friend of ours, Ryan McDonald. and says about the thoughts about Trump's new social media. So we talked a little bit about that yesterday, in which, I mean, my position was that if it gets off the ground, I think it could be a big deal, because I think the assumption has to be Trump is running in 2024. This will be his vehicle. And you, Peter, you were skeptical because you thought that all of the internet giants are going to swoop in and kill it before it really gets off the ground. And I don't know. I mean, I
don't either.
I don't disagree with you. So yeah.
But I think we could. I think there's a different trajectory to look at here. And I'm just theorizing right now, or as they say in media, we're spitballing. Okay, one can make an argument, I think, just as solid, is that Trump isn't going to be returning to politics, and that he's cashing in now. He's going to cash in with this project. Okay, and what's really interesting, which only one other person has talked about this, because I took a look at this today, is that this is Trump's. He's getting back at Fox because he's going to cannibalize their audience. That's what he wants to do, okay? He'll never forgive Fox. Why his daughter-in-law is on it, I have no idea. As a matter of fact, she adds no value whatsoever. Absolutely. It's like a person on the street, okay? Absolutely. Okay, yeah. Just complete waste of time. Okay. Yep. Anyway, I think, and we'll see. I mean, it's only been hours since the announcement. Okay, so we need to find out more things going on. But we got to posit that this is a signal that he is returning to politics, and I think we can equally say, without knowing more, that he might say, "Hey, I have brand value, and I'm going to cash in on this." Okay, and a lot of people will be interested in it. So let's see which way it goes here.
Oh, I think it's a possibility, but Trump, I would find it hard to believe now, given all of the hints that he has made, that he's just simply going to say, "I'm not running." I mean, unless there's health issues. I mean, if some health issue comes up, then yeah, he's not going to run. But I think, given all that he's said, he said it over again with all this saying, "Hey, I think you're going to like the answer." And he obviously, what we know about him is that he doesn't like to lose. I mean, that's something that, I mean, he's so angry about 2020 that I don't think he's just going to walk away without getting another shot in at the Democrats.
Having said that, you could also make the countervailing argument is that if he says that he's not going to run, then his star burns, okay? He fades away. So he has to keep the tension there. He has to keep people interested in it. And it would actually help with this endeavor as well, okay? I mean, if he says, "No, I'm not going to run," yeah, why platform, and then, why don't you work on your presidential library and
he's
things
not, yeah, he's got money. Yeah, I know. I mean, I know that. Yeah.
Hang on. One thing for sure, he wants to stay in the spotlight. We can agree on that.
I think we can agree on that, but he doesn't need money. He's got money. I mean, he's a wealthy man, and he doesn't really need the money. I think what matters to him is, I think, revenge for 2020. And if he were to say suddenly, "Hey, let's say in 2023, he says, I changed my mind, I'm not running," he will be the quitter. You remember with Ross Perot? I mean, that was how it destroyed. I mean, what he did to his psyche. That, I think, was that famous cover. I think it was Time on Newsweek. Remember, it has the back of Ross Perot, and it had the headline, "The Quitter." That hurt him. I mean, he was very distressed because people like that, these alpha male types, they do not like to be called quitters. I mean, it's the worst thing you can be. So I think that's why I think it would be very difficult for him now to walk away, unless and it's possible that health issues could emerge. I mean, he's not a young man.
Or maybe he wants to anoint one of his sons. Okay. I mean, Don Jr., I mean, he's making the rounds. He's a very effective public speaker. He's not his father, obviously, but again, I think this is one of the options that are on the table to see where it goes. Obviously, Donald Trump wants to still be in the game. I mean, he's not on social media. This is a way for him, at least some kind of rough equivalent, to get back into that. and remind people, because if he does walk away, then he fades away. So he has to continue to up the ante here. So, and
Right.
I agree with you, George. I mean, his psychological profile, he's going to fight to the day he dies for something.
Right. So we have another super chat from Darren Levy. Thank you very much, Darren. And he says, I think Trump could gain a lot of voters if he came out and supported an NHS-style healthcare system for America against the insurance industries. I actually agree with that. I think that when he ran in 2016, he seemed to be going in that direction, basically just cutting off Obamacare sort of from the left and saying, hey, we'll get rid of all the mandates and then we'll just have a national healthcare system. But he backed away from that, and I think that hurt him in the 2020 election, because that was a question he really couldn't answer. They said, well, all right, where's your healthcare plan? I mean, you said you were going to remove and replace, or what was it? Something about Obamacare. Something remove and replace.
Repeal and replace.
Repeal and replace. That's the phrase. Yeah, repeal and replace. And so he repealed the mandate. But what have you replaced it with? And he couldn't really come up with any answer. He just kept repeating, yeah, well, I've got rid of the mandate. Yeah, but where is it? So I think a national healthcare along the NHS lines, I think would go down very well. I think would be a very good theme for him.
I mean, again, that's that lane. That's that open lane. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And I'm glad this question is being asked, because if Trump wants to take another bite at the apple, he better be thinking very big. Okay. I mean, really big. And something like that would be very important. Again, George and I have talked endlessly about reindustrialization. I mean, and if he does come back, he has to say, we don't just need to do this during my second term, but right. We have to mandate across the board. This is a 25-year endeavor, and we all accept it, and you don't play with it, okay? Right. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a massive, massive plan.
Right. No, I think so, and I think that if he comes in. All right, he's a one-term president because he's already had one inning, so therefore he doesn't have to worry about re-election because he can't run for a third time. So therefore he can get everything possible done within that one term. So the insurance industry, they're going to go after him, and he said, "Well, I don't care. Do what you want. I'm going to go ahead and create a national healthcare system. And if you try to destroy it, I'm going to come after you." So I think that given that he's only going to be a one term, it gives them far more flexibility than otherwise. Oh my God, I've got to run for re-election, and now the insurance industry is going to try and destroy me when I run for re-election. He doesn't have to worry about that now.
Well, what he will have is he could make with a pen and paper executive orders. He can turn a lot of lives into a nightmare with just the stroke of a pen, and just let the courts worry about it. Okay.
Right.
Sue me.
Right. No, that's exactly right. So from James H, he said, what hurt him is that he hired the likes of John Bolton. I don't disagree. I think the appointment of John Bolton was always a mystery. I have no idea, but it goes back to even 2016, because I remember the 2016 campaign when people were asking him, well, who are the foreign policy people that you listen to? Who do you like? Who do you admire? And he kind of thought and said, well, I like John Bolton. And it was always kind of strange. I mean, why? But it seems like he probably just watched John Bolton once on the telly, and then he's the one name that he could come up with.
We could probably figure out the date and on what program, because I just loathe John Bolton. Okay, I mean, really loathe him. Right. And I saw him. I think he was like on, I think, Laura Ingraham, and I was, oh, John Bolton, and then within days. Right. That's the epicenter of it. Okay, with appearance, and Trump probably is the only president in modern history that actually sits at home and watches TV. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's right. But it's very similar to that wretched woman, Katie McFarland. Now she's this. I don't know if you know this woman. She's kind of a regular at Fox News, and she was appointed Michael Flynn's #2. And she was an absolute nitwit. I mean, she's the one who hired Fiona Hill. I mean, she hired Fiona Hill. I mean, she knew nothing. And so there was a mystery. Well, how did she get this job? And apparently she ran into Don Jr. in the green room at Fox News once, and Don Jr. really took to her, and he recommended her. And so that was it. She got this job totally out of her depth. You know, again, she's a foreign policy expert. I mean, I don't know. She did a little bit. I think she was in the Nixon National Security Council or some lowly position. But she's a foreign policy expert. And there it was, absolute disaster. And I think, and that was a problem with the whole Trump enterprise, is that it was really like a pickup basketball game. I mean, you know, they didn't really have a team in place of whom to hire, so they just sort of picked out randomly, you know, well, who's available? Oh yeah, well, you know, he had a job in the Reagan administration, you know, let's put him in. Oh yeah, he had a job with the Nixon administration, let's bring him in. So they had no idea what they were doing.
Well, I mean, the irony of all of it is that he made his name in the public eye with the Apprentice, which I never saw. Okay,
no, I never saw that.
He was supposed to be a judge of people's ability. I mean, right. Talk about irony. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's right. Again, Herman Montoya said what hurt Trump was he hires swamp-like creatures like Mike Pompeo, Gina Haspel, Elliot Abrams, John Bolton, Christopher Wray, Bill Barr, and don't go on. You know, you've earned your points there, Herman. I think that's that's right, and I think that goes to the heart of it, which is he really didn't have a list of people that whom he could hire. But I mean, Pat Buchanan, I think he wrote a book shortly after Trump came to power, you know, which was his book about Nixon. And his point was that this was the problem Nixon was having. He didn't have in place, you know, the kind of people that he wanted. So many agencies of government fell into the hands of people who absolutely hated him. I mean, they were just they just detested him and wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. And you know, I think that's you know, very much what happened. I mean, at the time, Washington was still very much run by, you know, the Kennedy Johnson crowd, even the people who go back to the New Deal and Harry Truman. They loathed Nixon, but you know, Nixon had to put up with them, even though so they were all right away trying to sabotage Nixon. And I think that Trump was in that position.
And then the juxtaposition is that Biden, I mean, he had this waiting pool of these small-minded, low-octane thinkers in waiting. Right. And you know, for me, the irony of, you know, we need adults in the room, and I mean, not those adults and not that room. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's right. You know, the adults in the room, which is very funny because you probably saw today that Biden, I think, said it in his CNN town hall. I think it was at the town hall. He said that all America is committed to coming to Taiwan's defense. He said this before. This is the second time he said this. And you think, hey, you're supposed to be Mr. Foreign Policy. He had been chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. His whole thing was, well, I've talked to this leader and I've talked to that leader. You know, I know foreign policy. You get something like that wrong, and then for the second time, they have to rush in. White House has to rush in and correct him. So yeah, I mean, when you say low octane thinkers, I mean, you're making mistakes of this magnitude, and you're supposed to be Mr. Foreign Policy.
Well, George, he said in the same day, and a talk, I think it was at the Martin Luther King thing, or was it the
Martin Luther King thing? Yeah.
Yeah, but he said he was vice president for 36 years. I was vice president for 36 years.
Yeah. That's right. I think, yeah.
But that foreign policy gaffe it's very serious, folks. It's very serious because, again, you know, you have Mark Milley calling up his counterpart, saying everything is fine in America. I mean, then why are you calling? Okay.
Exactly. That's right. Yes.
And now you have the president of the United States that doesn't know America's official ambiguous, and it was intentionally
strategic ambiguity. Yeah.
Okay? And now the president of the United States is making some kind of statement or declaration that is no longer ambiguous. I mean, you're not dealing with Honduras here.
Yeah. Second time. No, this is twice he's done that. So again, China's not looking, very concerned. Just as you said, when Milley calls them and say, "Oh yeah, don't worry about a thing. Trump isn't going to attack you, and if he does, I will call you ahead of time." And so they think, what the hell?
You guys. I mean, if when that was released, and if Milley said, "This is absolutely ridiculous. I never did it. This is completely made out of whole cloth," but he didn't deny it. That was even worse. It's like it did happen.
It did happen. Exactly. That's what was shocking. There it is. It's in Woodward's book, and all of those people, all those creatures like Tom Cotton and these Republicans, they leapt to the defense of Milley. And they said, "Well, it's in Bob Woodward's book, and I don't believe anything Bob Woodward said." I mean, I don't necessarily believe what Bob Woodward said. However, the issue was, how come Milley hasn't denied it? Day after day goes by, and Milley doesn't deny it. And then when Milley comes and testifies on Capitol here, he essentially confirms Bob Woodward's story. So, it was absolutely nonsensical for all those Tom Cotton types to leap to the defense of Milley when everything we'd already known about him made the story plausible.
But see, this is the foundation of my profound pessimism, is because here's a guy, a lunatic. This guy is a lunatic on many, many levels. He's a psychopath on many different levels. But power protects power. That's why even these senior Republicans are not going to go after him, because once you get to that level of power, everybody is huddled together. Okay, that's why I'm so fundamentally pessimistic. I mean, if Trump, had made a call and everyone had been listening, and he's like, "I'm not going to attack you." I mean, they just said, even the Republicans would say, "Get him out of here." Okay, I mean, there's no. There's no set rule here, okay? Right. I mean, except for power protects power. Right. And for me to have the Joint Chief of Staff be able to get away with this, it's horrifying, absolutely horrifying.
It is horrifying because he was doing something, he wasn't authorized to do, and in doing so, he was actually endangering the United States, because he was making clear to the Chinese that there was some plan afoot to attack China. I mean, that's what they're going to come away with this phone call. I mean, so he was really, endangering the United States. I mean, you think this is a guy who's supposed to be at the top, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you make a blunder of this magnitude. And again, I think he's still there. He, because I guess Biden thinks, well, if he's anti-Trump, it's good. I mean, but the guy should have been fired immediately.
Can you imagine? So his counterpart, I think his name is General Lee. Okay, so imagine the scenario. General Lee, it's him again. What? Alert the armed forces. I'm talking to the lunatic in the Pentagon.
That's right.
We don't know where it's going to land. Right. Why is this guy calling us?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And for him to say, well, we have this intelligence that the Chinese were getting very worried about an American attack. Well, if he had this intelligence, then he should have gone to the president and said that it's up to, can you call and reassure them? Because it would be up to the president to make such a call. But if you go behind the back of the president and say, no, don't worry about a thing. We're not going to attack. They're just going to say, yeah, that means you are going to attack.
George is a huge fan of old films, and Stanley Kubrick's film, Dr.
Strangelove.
Dr. Strangelove, one of the greatest films of all time. Right. This have Peter Sellers playing the president talking to the Soviet premier. That's what it's kind of like. Kubrick was such a visionary because he predicted it, and it essentially happened eventually.
It really was. I mean, exactly. He was a visionary of, again, what happens when generals absolutely run rampant. And again, we thought that it was a little bit exaggerated at the time, because after all, Truman had fired MacArthur, but it really wasn't exaggerated. Now again, we have generals who just think that they're running the show.
What we know from very belatedly, but part of the Pentagon Papers, there was, I guess, an annex or something like that, where the generals wanted to go to war with China in 1958. Right. And Eisenhower was saying, "Are you out of your mind?"
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. Which I think why Eisenhower was so skeptical about the advice of the military. But remember when the attacks that took place on Trump at the time of Helsinki, but even before, Trump is taking the side of Putin against his own generals. Trump is taking the side of Putin against his own intelligence people. Well, if you're the president and you really don't think much of the advice you're getting from your generals and from your intelligence people, then you should go and listen to what the others are saying. I mean, I was in Trump's place. Yeah, I don't trust what my intelligence people are telling me.
You can, the first draft of history, Trump trusts Putin more than his own intelligence. But as we speak, George, October 22nd, 2001, Trump was vindicated. The military was against him. They lied to him. The intelligence community spied upon him. His own party at the highest levels betrayed him. They let the hoax continue when they knew it was completely false. Trump was absolutely right on that one.
Exactly right. Exactly right. He did. He was absolutely right when he went there to Helsinki, and when he said, Putin, he reassured me that they weren't spying, and I just don't believe anything my intelligence people are telling me. His position would have been absolutely correct, and unfortunately, he kind of, he went back on that after Helsinki. But what he did at Helsinki was perfectly right, and he said, okay, President Putin, he's offered to work with us and try to sort this out. I think, and he said, I think it's a great offer. And everyone just went ballistic. And when I say everyone, it wasn't just CNN, Fox News went ballistic. What? You want Putin? You're going to have Putin? That's a scene like, remember you mentioned Dr. Strangelove, when the president invites in the Soviet ambassador, and in order to see the board, where all of the targets that the American planes are going to hit, and so, are you crazy? Are you bringing in the Soviet ambassador? He's going to see this. Yeah, that's the whole point. we want the Russians to see all this in order to save the world. So that was in the same thing. Yeah, that's the whole point. Let's sort this nonsense out once and for all and compare our intelligence notes. And then everyone created, Brian Kilmeade and all the rest of them had just went, oh, Trump is, Putin. Putin is the most evil man in the world, and Trump is facilitating him.
What Trump should have done is not take the bait. He said, well, obviously there are investigations going on. Let's find out what conclusions are, and then I can talk to my counterpart. But I'm not here to talk about that with my counterpart, so let's move on.
Well, I mean, I think that as soon as he came there, I remember, and Fiona Hill talked about this. She said, the only thing that everyone wanted to talk about was the spying on the election. I mean, so that was obviously, what the journalists were going to raise. And I think if you're the president of the United States and you don't think much of what the intelligence people are telling you, I think it's perfectly fine to say, yeah, I mean, look, I think the story Putin's telling me makes a lot more sense than what the intelligence people are telling me. And I think that was a good position. Of course, Fiona Hill, and she said, I think she said in that essay, I thought maybe I should faint and maybe cause a distraction. Again, that says something about her mental stability.
Well, this coming from a woman where the primary subsource, Danchenko, she hired him.
That's right. Yeah.
He worked with him.
That's right. Yeah.
The amount of so much dishonesty.
Yeah. So I've got another question from Kevin Dorr. Very nice. Says Trump's 24 cabinet. I say that he's saying who it should be. So McGregor, okay. Kash Patel, good. John Ratcliffe, yes. John Kiriakou, yep. Mark Meadows, yep. Grinnell, yep. That's not a bad team. I mean, I think you're onto something there, because now, having been in office, he's not going to be back in the whole thing. Should I go to Wall Street, and what big shot in Wall Street should I appoint to head the Treasury? So now that he knows something about whom he can rely on and whom he can just discard. So I think that's not a bad team. What do you think, Peter?
I agree as well.
Yeah.
And it's like people like Radcliffe and like that make their media appearances. It's God sent, because say, no, I was there. That's not what happened, and this is what we did as part of the public record. So yeah, I mean, what would have been? I mean, that's, you and I have said this thousands of times. Just he had an HR problem, okay, and that would have helped him focus more and put more attention. I mean, here's Obama's going out the door, and he tells the newly elected president the two people he has to worry about most is Kim Jong-un and Michael Flynn. That should have been a flag. Okay?
No, exactly. Exactly. I think his firing of Flynn was an absolute disaster. There was no need for that whatsoever. The whole nonsense. Oh well, he lied to Vice President Pence.
So what?
Yeah. A, so what? B,
what?
How do you know he lied to him? Why would you believe Pence? I mean, it's like, if you're worried, hey, we have two people, there's a dispute. What do? You bring them in and say, okay, promise that you'll all be very truthful and nice to each other going forward. Yes, we do, Mr. President. Good. Now get out of here. I mean, that's what bosses do. I mean, they just say, you bring them in, and say, hey, sort this out and stop bothering me with it. But by saying, well, he lied to Mike Pence. How does he know he lied to Mike Pence? He doesn't know that. Just because Pence said so.
I didn't even know how to get around them. He's there. Okay, the vice president is there if something goes wrong with the president. So if you lie or you smear or you snicker at the vice president, it's part of the job. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Who cares?
Right. Yeah, I mean, imagine Nixon sort of hears, brings in Kissinger and Spiro Agnew, and Spiro Agnew says, well, Kissinger lied to me. I mean, Nixon would just sort of kick him out of the office. I mean, what are you wasting my time for? I need Kissinger. I don't particularly need you. So stop this nonsense. I mean, Trump needed Flynn. He didn't really need Pence. And as it turned out, Pence did nothing for him. So, but there's no question. I think that if he can start putting forward. I think this Kevin's cabinet: McGregor, Kiriakou, Kash Patel, Grinnell, Meadows. I think that's not a bad team. I mean, I remember when we were talking about 2016, and we were thinking about, well, what should his team be? I mean, I think we were talking about, I think, Stephen Cohen. I think you should have brought Stephen Cohen in some capacity. I think either Ron Paul or Rand Paul, he should have brought him in. I think
Ray McGovern, I think.
Ray McGovern, yeah, absolutely.
He's like, gray hairs. He was he with George H. Bush. Ray McGovern gave the morning intelligence briefing. Right. Just very mature, being able to see very far and wide, and how the system works. I mean, I think that his advice would be golden for Trump. And Ray McGovern is a person of great gravity. I mean, yes. He's not prone to hyperbole at all.
No, exactly. No, he's absolutely has, very solid, very much a safe pair of hands. He doesn't get hysterical or anything like that. I think so. And then we have someone like John Mearsheimer. I think, bring Mearsheimer in, again, very solid advice. I just thought he should hire Pat Buchanan in some capacity, again, as a part of his kitchen cabinet. Yeah.
Well, we still have time.
Yeah, exactly. While we still have time. But unfortunately, he didn't do it. I mean, he after Flynn, Flynn was not a bad appointment. I mean, there were problems about Flynn, such as his obsession with Iran.
Yeah.
But I think there were many good aspects to Flynn. But after that, with all these people, McMaster and then Bolton, and I mean, these were absolutely terrible appointments. And then Gina Haspel. I mean, what the hell? What was that? I mean,
Abrams, a convicted felon,
absolutely. Yeah.
in the same portfolio.
Exactly the same portfolio. And this was somebody who actually even denounced him in 2016. So he's not even a political ally. Again, you're hiring people who are not your political allies. I mean, it just made no sense for him. And then he's surprised that just about everybody in the administration was out to get him.
What about Tucker Carlson as chief of staff?
That would be interesting.
Chief of staff and a press spokesperson.
Right. Yeah, no, that would definitely be an interesting appointment. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that if you could, I mean, we could put together a pretty decent list of his essential team, and then
no Jared.
Exactly, Jared is out, and his daughter Ivanka is out as well. I mean, they were an absolute disaster for him. So, I mean, what he should really be doing is going by his instinct. Unfortunately, in his appointments, he wasn't really going by his instinct. He was going by what people were telling him to do. And I imagine, I mean, as being the head of a successful company, normally when he appoints people, I think he goes by instinct. I mean, do I feel this person is on my wavelength? I think he didn't do this. I mean, I just don't see how he could ever have thought that Bolton was on his wavelength.
Well, I think Bolton, being the old operator that he was, that he thought he could capture Trump. I mean, that's the level of hubris that John Bolton has. By the way, everyone, John Bolton appeared on Going Underground on RT
I didn't know
UK, and it was a very interesting interview. I probably would have been, and George would have been far more aggressive, but then it probably wouldn't much have been said. And so basically, he was kind of given a lot of room to express himself and to make a fool out of himself, in my opinion. But it was a very interesting interview. Going Underground, just type in YouTube, Going Underground Bolton, take a look at the interview. It's very interesting.
Really? Yeah, I didn't, I saw that it was happened, but I didn't watch. So we have, Herman Montoya says that Colin Powell is loved by liberals and the establishment since he endorsed Obama, Biden, and crooked Hillary for president. I think, and no question that they like it for that. But I think Colin Powell has always been a strange figure, because I think although the Republicans have embraced him, he's never really particularly liked Republicans, because I think Karl Rove has told the story that in 2000, the only reason Colin Powell endorsed George W. Bush rather than Al Gore, whom he intended to endorse, was that he was promised the job of Secretary of State. That's what it is, Secretary of State. And then once Powell got that job offer, they said, yeah, I'm right behind George W. Bush. So I don't think Powell has ever been pro-Republican. Republicans have liked him, and they have appointed him to all sorts of positions, but it's been very much a one-sided love affair. Powell has never reciprocated.
Well, when George and I did the obit on him, it's what we distilled it down to is that he was largely, if not completely, apolitical until he gave a speech to the United Nations General Assembly. Right. And then he went full political, and he destroyed his legacy completely, right. Utterly. And we have to also remember is that he openly came out against Trump, which so not only was the left attracted to him, they embraced him. Okay, right, so right. I mean the amazing odyssey of Colin Powell. Okay, again he had greatness within his grasp, and he destroyed it. That's the Oliver Stone subtitle of his film on Nixon: Greatness Within His Grasp. I'm sorry, I can't buy into the idea that Colin Powell had greatness in his grasp. I think Colin Powell was a great operator. He didn't get there by accident. Okay, he was an operator. He knew how to do it. He was
an operator, but what really, you have to be honest. I mean, what really worked for him? He was black, and people wanted to promote somebody who was black. And he wasn't Jesse Jackson. He wasn't Adam Clayton Powell. He wasn't Al Sharpton. And so he was, I think, promoted above his true abilities. I mean, you know, he's a national security advisor, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Secretary of State. I mean, why would he be Secretary of State? I mean, what knowledge of foreign policy does he have? And so, but he was, I think it was just a case of people wanted him, they wanted, you know, this is the image they wanted to present of America to the world. Hey, look, we have, you know, these, you know, blacks, you know, in very senior positions.
Okay,
I mean, it's like, you know, when you look at Hollywood movies, you know, why is the president of the United States in so many movies played by Henry Fonda? Because Americans want the idea of Henry Fonda as president, because he sort of has gravitas, he's good looking, he's very serious. You know, they don't want to have John Wayne as president, because that's not a good look to have John Wayne as president, but Henry Fonda. And I think that was, it worked for Colin Powell. Oh boy, this guy's very solid, but he's a man of, I think modest ability.
He proved himself to be competent. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Okay.
All right. I mean, okay. All right. I agree. I think the greatness within his grasp, I think, is just.
No. Okay, let's finish that. Okay, greatness within his grasp by going to the United Nations and saying, this is a crock of shit, and I'm fine.
No, yeah, I agree with that. Yes, absolutely.
That's what I mean.
I thought you mean like his career and everything. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, yes. So here we have Coop W says real whistleblowers are in jail or banished to Russia. Not quite sure what that's apropos, but I think that's.
Oh, I know what that is. I mean, it's a complete bastardization of what whistleblower, the Facebook whistleblower. Right. Oh my God. Okay, yes. That's a Trojan horse. Okay, I mean, John Kiriakou, he's a real whistleblower. He paid. Right. He paid heavily.
Maybe that's what he was apropos of Kiriakou. Yeah. No, I think that is a very good. Yeah, Kiriakou paid. He did time in prison. His career, I mean, he was at the CIA. Career is over. And yeah, no question. Of course, others have paid a much higher price, especially, of course, Julian Assange, but Snowden as well. I mean, Snowden is banished from America. It's, who knows? Probably unlikely he will ever be able to return to the United States. No question. That's what happens to real whistleblowers. You pay a heavy price, and of course, again, with Chelsea Manning, again, also, she paid a very heavy price for what she did. And
then the original one, Daniel Ellsberg, which and I think he's synonymous with the very idea of a whistleblower. And thank goodness he did what he did, because he became an icon for people to have the courage and strength to do what he did, because he informs people, on how to do the right thing, and there could be consequences. He did survive the consequences. I mean, the courts came in and gave him a lot of cover. I don't think that would ever happen again.
No, that's a very good point. I think that it was a very different time. I mean, I think that in those days, I think the courts took a much more, let's say, a libertarian view of free speech.
In a good way. In a good way.
In a good way, exactly. Now, I think they're much more on the side of government and belief in the prerogatives of government to suppress dissent. Yeah, absolutely.
The FISA system, these FISA. I mean, that tells you everything. I mean, do they even read it?
Yeah, that's exactly, and exactly. I mean, so far, like the Supreme Court, it's on the issue of the mandates, which again, had it been back then in 1970, I think that Supreme Court would have taken a much more, pro-individual position than now, and would not have said, "Hey, the government has a right to tell you to take the vaccine. Employers have a right to fire you if you don't take the vaccine." I don't believe that court, the Warren Court or the Berger Court, would have taken the side of the government or the employers.
I agree.
Yeah. But I think Ellsberg himself has said that he doesn't think that, if he were doing today what he did back then in 1971, he would he wouldn't have been able to get away with it today. I mean, I think he said that today, he would probably have been sentenced to life imprisonment. So I think he himself said, I was kind of lucky that it was a different time.
Yeah, well, it shows the negative progression that we've experienced here. Okay.
That's right.
And then we get the perversion of it, like these Panama Papers, and what was the most recent one?
I think
Paradise.
Panama, was it Paragon? Was it Paragon?
I think the Paradise Papers.
Was it Paradise? Okay, all right, okay.
Panama, and it's everyone. These are complete frauds.
Absolutely.
These are all establishment vetted journalists, and so they're trying to create the illusion that this is the new WikiLeaks. Okay, it's all fraud. It's complete. Psych op is what it is.
It really is.
The interesting thing is that it tells you who's actually in the pocket of the state. Okay, the journalists.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, they've been doing that with WikiLeaks. They've been trying to kind of create an alternative to WikiLeaks from the beginning. That was like, whoa, we're going to have a real whistleblowing site, and they've tried various ways. Because there was, unfortunately, WikiLeaks had been infiltrated with a lot of bad people over the years. Obviously that guy from Iceland who betrayed him, but there was another guy in Germany, Berg Domscheit or something like that, who also fell out with Assange, and then he said, "Oh well, I'm going to start my own kind of version of WikiLeaks," and of course. He gets promoted by the Wall Street Journal and the mainstream media. Now we're going to have a real whistleblower site. This is really going to expose stuff, by which they mean, yes, he's going to be exposing stuff about Russia. That's your job. You're a whistleblower. Your job is to expose stuff about Russia.
These are the people that be whistling what you want people to hear.
Exactly. That's exactly. That's what they mean by whistleblower. Whistleblower is someone who's blowing the whistle on people that you don't like, Russia, Iran, North Korea, the usual cast of suspects. But even then, this guy Berg Domscheit, I think that was his name, he didn't produce anything. I mean, just that organization, whatever it was called, just vanished. He had no sources, no access to stuff. So it's a measure of how the brilliance of Julian Assange. And of course, they kept saying, "Oh, he hasn't exposed anything on Russia." Well, his point was that give me documents from Russia. I mean, I don't go looking for documents. If people give me documents from Russia, I'll do it. And I think he did do some things on Russia. I think that he has published those documents. But I mean, he's a publisher, so he published what people gave him. And obviously he went through all the cross-referencing and so on. But his job wasn't to go, well, let me get some stuff on Putin, and that's not quite how he was operating.
I've heard that argument so many times.
Yeah.
Gotta find a whistleblower here. Okay, so amazing how what we've seen. When in looking at the Attorney General in his combative testimony about this critical race theory and parents and all that. I mean, what an opaque guy. I mean, geez, can't answer a simple question. I thought these were supposed to be intelligent people. I mean, and then the conflict of interest with his son-in-law. I mean, again, the double standard is just so nauseating.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a disgraceful performance, and I think people have noted that it's very similar to the performance of Mueller when he came before Congress to explain about his report. It was clear that Mueller had absolutely no idea what was in the report. He didn't write the report. He knew nothing about it. So every time there was a question, he kind of parried. He didn't know. And the same thing with the Attorney General, this Garland guy, that it's clear he doesn't run the DOJ. I mean, I think people have been saying that Lisa Monaco, his number 2, is running the DOJ, because he seemed fairly clueless. So when they asked him about that, the memo and the parents who were threatening violence, and he was asked, what violence? He couldn't even come up with any examples of, what violence have they committed? What violence have they've been threatening? So, and he said, well, I didn't call them domestic terrorists. Well, yeah, you did. I mean, that's exactly what you did. You called them domestic terrorists. And then when he was asked also yesterday with about the break into the Interior Department, we said, well, here we have the break-in into the Department of Interior, and then we have the break-in on Capitol Hill. So one is terrorism. Are you going to call this terrorism? Well, I don't really know. One I know something about, the other I don't know anything. Well, what do you mean you don't know? I mean, it happened a week ago. You're the Attorney General.
Down from your office, dude. I mean, give a call over. I'm sure they'll pick up for you. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about it. Well, I mean, people were talking about January the 6th immediately within half an hour. A week's gone by and you don't know anything about it. I mean, so and all of the questions they were asking about the prosecuting with the Antifa and Black Lives Matter, he had no answers to that. It was an appalling performance. And imagine, this was the guy that Obama wanted on the Supreme Court.
Well, one of the interesting things, and I think that you and I are kind of very dubious about polling, but a lot of mainstream Democrats feel uncomfortable with all of this.
Right.
I mean, because this isn't an anti-Trump thing. Okay, right. You can't pull Trump into it.
Right.
Okay, and so I think on the face of it, people find, well, this is very unsettling. Yes. And the obvious overreach here. Right. I mean, this memo that he signed, it just, again, we keep getting new records, George. I mean, I have never could have imagined being, quote unquote, proactive, on the attack. Right. It's breathtaking.
Right.
Yeah, usually the DOJ is a lot more, they step back with the exception of the Russiagate clowns. Right. Okay.
Right.
That is such a getting ahead of the shark thing. It's very weird. And I think it proves your point that somebody else is writing these memos.
I think so. But again, I mean, you bring up Russiagate because it's clear that we are paying the price, that there's been no reckoning with Russiagate. Lisa Monaco, she pushed the Russiagate hoax. We have Sullivan. Sullivan is the national security advisor, big Russiagater, and they're all there. They haven't paid any sort of a price. I mean, they basically abuse the government, abuse their governmental powers to go after their political opponents, and they're kind of taken up where they left off. I mean, because this is what they're doing. They're going after they're going after parents, parents worrying about their children. And this guy calls them domestic terrorists, and then he denies that he did so. And as you say, there's also the obvious conflict of interest. I mean, and he doesn't see any conflict of interest. I mean, they kept asking, I don't see any. I think it's about the threat of violence, for which there was no threat of violence.
I mean, I don't know which congressperson it was, but I mean, asked repeatedly if there had been conflicts of interest with the ethics arm of the DOJ, and he failed on that one too. Right. I mean, really, I mean, the incoming, the Attorney General didn't have any ethics questions reviewed at all. Right. I mean, of all jobs.
Yes, of all jobs, exactly. That's why you're the guy whose job is to bring forward, prosecuting people, and then you say, hey, your son-in-law is making a lot of money on all of this. But I mean, what this Justice Department is now doing. I mean, first of all, with everything it's doing with this January the 6th defendants, they're languishing in prison again. It's now, these are people who've been languishing in prison now close on to 10 months. 10 months, and they haven't been charged with anything. I mean, or rather, they haven't come to trial. Now, bail it's a fundamental right. That basically that you cannot be detained if you haven't been convicted of anything. I mean, it's a basic right. I mean, unless it's something so serious, murder or whatever. But even suspected murderers get bail.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
but that's the thing. So they're there. I mean, 10 months still, and the trial is now scheduled sometime into next year. There is no justification whatsoever for them to be detained, other than on political grounds that these terrible people, don't believe that the 2020 election was on the up and up, and that's what they're getting punished for. That's why they keep they're sitting in those jail cells, having not been convicted of anything, because they still believe that there was something wrong with the 2020 election.
There were a lot of problems in 1960. There were a lot of problems in 2000. Okay, you can say that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But no, you cannot. If you call into question the 2020 election, then you deserve to sit in prison. There's no justification. This is absolute tyranny. I mean, if you go to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all of these other solemn treaties that all countries are supposed to adhere to, they all basically say you cannot detain people, indefinitely without trial. I mean, and in this case, there's no justification for it other than it's politics. I mean, these are clearly political prisoners.
Okay. Bad speech is protected. Okay, exactly. That's why we have protections for stuff that you don't like. Right. That's why we have the First Amendment, and to protect people to say stupid shit.
Right. Exactly.
Okay? In case that's true. Okay.
Right.
It's a fundamental right. This is not hard to understand. Okay. Right. Yeah. Because then you're saying there you have affirmational speech. No, we don't have that. It's not part of our Anglo-Saxon tradition, and they're trying to force it down our throats. Okay. You don't have to say, I think that the election was clean as a whistle. There's nothing in our past, nothing in our tradition that says you have to say stuff that you don't believe. Now, what you believe may be wrong. I don't know, but you can't force people to say something that they don't believe.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to force down people's throats something that they don't believe. And exactly, you can believe that the moon is made of green cheese. That's it. That's your right. You can believe any kind of wrong-headed notion, but you can't be in prison for it. And these people who are languishing in jail, most of them, I think all of them, none of them has a criminal record. None of them is charged with violence. Even whatever violence there appears to have taken place on January, it's very, very murky, because again, the government hasn't released. They're cherry picking what the tapes that they release. I think there's a lot more that we're going to find out about what happened between the police and the people. I think those
and the FBI infiltration.
Right, exactly.
I actually have a question for the Attorney General of the United States, and I'm going to use the gaggle as my platform. How many people do you have detained without bail, without being, in some cases, not charged, and certainly not being tried? How many of the entire universe of people, is there any case of one of them leaving a Glock, a loaded Glock, in a men's room, in a public men's room? I would like that answer from the Attorney General of the United States.
Yes, that's a very, very good point. Exactly. That's the guy just kept his job. Oh well, left a loaded.
I'm the victim. I'm the victim here.
Yeah,
I'm the victim.
So imagine that, and of course you got, Hunter Biden who kind of dumped the gun into the trash, again, that's fine, no problem there. I mean, it is just sort of mind-boggling when you have a justice system that goes after its political opponents, and then it really persecutes them. I mean, like, we had the example of Flynn. I mean, the guy just couldn't get out of he couldn't get out of this horrific system that he was caught up in. The DOJ wanted to drop the charges, and then this Obama appointed judge. No, I don't accept with the DOJ. I think he should be prosecuted.
I'm going to play judge and prosecutor.
Judge and prosecutor. I mean, it really is, I know it's an overused term, but it is kind of Kafkaesque. Well, okay, now I'm free to go. I mean, the Justice Department that doesn't want to prosecute me, surely I'm free to go. No, you're not free to go. I'm the judge, and I decide that you're not free to go. I don't care whether the DOJ wants to prosecute. I want to prosecute.
Well, and that judge should have been impeached. He should have been removed.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to make it sound like George and I are so old, but I mean, in our entire lifetime, we've never seen anything like these things at all.
Yeah.
Where a federal judge decides he doesn't. It's not your job is to adjudicate
Right.
A charge against a private citizen, and and do it as best you can, even-handedly, and then you decide, no, you can sit down. We're going to continue. It doesn't work that way.
No, that's the point. I mean, as a judge, your job is to adjudicate. You have two parties, and you're supposed to be the one in the middle. Your responsibility is to make sure that there is a fair process. That's it. Your job isn't to act as the captain of the prosecution team. I mean, you're there to make sure the defendant's rights are protected, and the prosecution is able to present a reasonable case. I mean, they said, no, I've decided that he needs to be prosecuted. And the courts, the higher courts, you think they kind of first stepped in and essentially overruled him, and then the en banc, you remember they said, oh, well, we'll have an en banc hearing, and then they supported him. I mean, what kind of clowns are on this DC circuit?
Well, I mean, they're all Obama appointees.
Yeah. That's right.
And we're going to have to leave it at this. Okay, we're on about 90 minutes here, but you see this continuum here, this corruption of the Justice Department, of the court system, and it's because of an ideology. That's what they all have in common, is an outlook. Okay, and this is it's really dead. Instead of adhering to the principles of the institution, they're just having open interpretation on a daily basis. It means something today, might mean something different tomorrow. You can't run a stable society like that for very long.
No, I think that's right, and I think that's why we have the media that attack Orban in Hungary, or they attack Poland. They say, "Well, look, they're attacking the independence of the judiciary." Yeah, but here in the United States, you're supposed to have an independent judiciary that isn't in any way independent. I mean, you have a judiciary that adheres to a particular ideology. They get appointed by Barack Obama, and they're hacks. They're ideological hacks. I mean, they're not in any way practicing what judges are supposed to be practicing. They're supposed to be judicious. They're nothing of the sort. So why that's superior to? So I think when Orban and says, I don't. These people are hacks. I think that's exactly what should happen here.
We can give you another real life example here on how to deal with Julian Assange. Okay, we have the New York Times problem, so we can't go that. Let's find another path. Okay, see, instead of just on the face of the evidence here, no, they're not interested in it. They're trying to find a different path, because what they don't want a process, they want a conclusion. Okay, and so they'll do anything they need to get the conclusion they want, irrespective of how thin it is judicially. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a very good analogy. Exactly. We've got the New York Times problem. Well, what should we do? Oh yeah, why don't we charge him with being engaged in the actual theft of the documents? There's no evidence for it, but they say, oh well, let's cook up some evidence. All of which is essentially they base it on the lies of this Icelandic creep, this pedophile and crook who stole money. That's what the entire basis of that he was involved in stealing the actual documents. So they do that. However flimsy, they go forward, and then again we have the judges in Britain who first of all say, okay, he's clearly. I mean, he has some there's a real serious risk of suicide, basing it on the expert opinion of a medical specialist. And again, what happens? Well, the higher court overturns that and said, no, well, we shouldn't have really based it on what this doctor said. I mean, again, you just go on and on and on, and everything against him has been thrown out. The Swedish case. absolute bullshit. That extradition warrant, the extradition warrant on which they detained him in Britain. The British changed the law because it was such a ridiculous extradition warrant, and they realized, hey, we can't rely on anything so nonsensical. And still, he's in prison. I mean, he wins every single round, and he's still in prison.
And the only thing that he actually did illegally was jump bail, and so this is his punishment.
That's right. And he had
really is this proportionate, everyone?
That's right. Exactly.
Is this proportionate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a super chat from AA. I don't know, Alcoholics Anonymous, Automobile Association, I don't know, but just AA. And he says, who do you guys think is the worst president? Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, or Biden? Well, that's a tough one. What do you think, Peter?
Obama.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think he spectacularly failed, given the hopes that people aspired in, found in him. He really was not anybody who should have been president, but people fell in love with the idea of this black man becoming president. Huge election victory in 2008. He had a mandate to do anything, and I think that he failed spectacularly, failed domestically, but internationally, I think he failed spectacularly. I mean, he rides to power because he was against the Iraq War, and then first thing he does, he hires Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. And then we have all of the debacles, Libya, Syria, Ukraine. And then his kind of reemergence, he's kind of dropped the mask that he had, that he was a kind of a moderate and a reasonable guy. And now, he's an Al Sharpton. I mean, he really is just a race baiter now.
When Colin Powell died, he came out with a comment. I don't know if it was a tweet or a press statement or something. And what was it about? It was all about him. It wasn't about Colin Powell. It's always about Barack Obama. That's right. It's always about him, which is so funny because, Trump was a narcissist. Yeah, he is a narcissist. But Obama is a narcissist. Okay. But the thing is that Trump is the real thing. Okay. I know what I see him. I understand him. I often disagree with him, but he's completely authentic. He's not a fraud. Right. Barack Obama was a fraud to his very core. All right. Very cool, yeah. Now, George, in the first part of his reaction, is the most important reason why I say that, because he had a mandate. He had people had a lot of hope in him. George W. Bush is an awful president because he lied about the war in Iraq. Okay, and it angers me that any kind of rehabilitation of this man is being played up, which it is right now. Okay, why? Because he's against Trump. Okay. Yes.
Exactly, but exactly. I think
I was going to say, there's one kind of thing I've always thought about Bill Clinton. It was a more or less okay presidency, but a failed president. Is a very interesting juxtaposition.
Right. But I think that because so much was vested in him, that his failure is all the more spectacular. I think it's interesting how. How others view Obama, here, because domestically you have a liberal media and so on, they're still in love with Obama. Abroad, they don't think that highly of Obama. The Russians absolutely detest him. They don't detest George W. Bush, because at least, actually relations with Russia were actually not bad during the George W. Bush years. But after all, Putin visited Bush in Crawford, Texas, but Obama they really detest, because they feel that Obama really deceived them. I mean, he deceived them above all on Ukraine. He absolutely lied into their face about Ukraine. He said Putin called him and said, "Are you going to support this agreement?" When Yanukovych signed that agreement with the opposition. And he said, and Putin flat out, Obama said to Putin, yeah, America's right behind the agreement. That agreement, which lasted less than 24 hours. So, complete lie to the Russians. And then, when Putin essentially saved Obama, because now Obama was stuck with the possibility of having to bomb Syria, and he came up with this formula, well, disarmament, and so it was a face-saving thing for Obama. And how did Obama thank him? By cooking up all this, the coup in Ukraine. So I think it is really interesting just that in other parts of the world they don't think highly of.
Yeah, and the Obama administration aided and abetted the 13 flavors of jihad all through the Middle East.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I think that's another thing. The 13 flavors of jihad.
You know what a harder question is? What are the most successful presidents? We always do. We default always to who's the worst. Okay,
that's a good question. That's a very good point. Exactly.
My prediction, and people are going to think we're out of our mind here, but as time goes by, the Nixon presidency is going to look better and better and better.
I think so too. I think that was a successful presidency because I think he had a clear vision of what he wanted to do in foreign affairs. He signed all of his arms control agreements. He had the opening to China, and then his domestic policies were very far-reaching. I mean, all of his creations like OSHA and EPA, it was a very, very basically an administration that had many accomplishments. It's like, well, what happened during this administration? Major historic accomplishments. Whereas, you look at Barack Obama, not too many accomplishments.
Empty suit. That's
exactly.
An empty suit for 8 years. Okay,
yeah.
8 years.
That's it. Exactly. It was an empty suit. And he took people in. And I think he's always been like that. I think he's always basically been taking people in throughout his life.
Did he ever break a sweat?
No. And now he's sort of cashing in. I mean, why is he in on this whole thing? This what's the thing that he's making money on now? The thing that you watch. Netflix, exactly. Why is he with Netflix?
Money. And you get to meet celebrities. That's all he wants is celebrity and money.
That's right.
It. And then I think the height of his egoism is that he's got Susan Rice in the White House. Okay, I mean, Barack Obama knows more about what's going on in the Biden administration than Joe Biden does. I'm
sure that's right. I'm sure that's right. I think that Susan Rice obviously has a direct line to Obama, and that everything is being run by Obama. And I think that Biden really isn't doing anything. I mean, Biden really does look like kind of a figurehead. And when he starts ranting and raving, as he did yesterday with the Martin Luther King thing about the great terrorist threat from white supremacists. I mean, that's the big threat the United States is facing. You kind of think, where's this coming from? And I think that the Obama, Susan Rice, I think that's where this nonsense is.
The biggest threat to America is Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. Yeah, exactly. And you're right about the celebrities, because that's, he has this party, the 60th birthday party, and he invites all these people. And then he had to scale it back, but he didn't really scale it very much back. That was a kind of a PR stunt, Well, he's being scaled back because, because of the bad publicity, but he really wasn't scaled back. But whom does he invite? Celebrities. Oh, these are a few of my close friends, all celebrities.
See, that's how we're different from him, because I think, if people were asked, and I'm not going to answer it now, but if people were to ask me who 10 people alive that I'd like to meet, you probably wouldn't have heard of many of them. They're academics, they're writers, maybe, film people, because I'm interested in their ideas. I don't want to be cool. Like it's kind of an alien idea to me. Okay.
Right.
I mean, because it has to be edifying, okay, and a contact and interaction. This is just pure egoism.
It is pure egoism, and I think that it's interesting that you had presidents in the past who retire. What do? They go, they write books, and like Eisenhower, he became, I think, chancellor of Columbia University. Obviously, you do serious things. You don't hang around with movie stars. I mean, I guess Eisenhower was a little old, but he could have hung around with movie stars. He didn't
Jimmy
want to do
Carter
it.
builds houses.
Exactly. Jimmy Carter builds houses. Exactly, and he also wrote books. I mean, in other words, you show yourself to be a serious person by what you do after your stint in the White House. And when you look at Obama, this is what you wanted to do. Just cash in. And again, he sold himself as a serious person. He's a new type of figure, new political figure. No, he acquired all of these ideas from Bill Clinton. Hey, you get these jobs. What comes with this job? Money and women. I mean, women isn't part of what Obama's into, but that's Bill Clinton. Money, women, celebrities. Yeah, well, with Obama, it was just money and celebrities.
And never break a sweat.
Never break a sweat. And
on top of it, I think it's an evil streak in him is that, see, he believes he has a vision for humanity. And so he's using Biden as the vessel because it'll destroy Biden, but at least the vision lives on. I mean, I think he really believes that.
I'm sure that's right. And I think it's very interesting also what you said about the narcissism, because Trump's narcissism is very different. I mean, Trump is a salesman. And I think, as you said yourself, he sells the brand. I mean, that's what he's been doing all his life. He sells that name. That's the brand. People buy him, they buy the name, they buy the product. And so he's always used to that. But he doesn't see himself as a kind of a world historic figure. He doesn't see himself as a, Moses, leading his people, across the desert. I mean, he's just basically, and I think Obama, however, does see himself as some, figure along the line of, Moses or Jesus. And I think that's real narcissism.
I completely agree with you, but I mean, just when he announced his media company, so you can stay in touch with your favorite president, that's what I'm kind of getting at. It's always, look, like you and I got used to it during the campaign, during his presidency and his campaign for 2020. And you can understand Trump speak. Okay, I understood it. I didn't need a translator. Okay, and I didn't need it to be mocked. I understood what he was trying to get at. And I have to agree with you is that it wasn't to build himself up. No, it wasn't that way because he doesn't need to be built up. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
That's your
right.
point.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
All right, George, can we wrap this up here? Do we have any more questions?
No, there was just a comment from Rail Fanning Points 2.0. And he's saying Obama was just a regime lackey for the billionaire globalist transhumanist Klaus Schwab crowd. I think he expressed it perfectly. I think he's always been that. And he has always loved that whole globalism. And we were talking about this earlier about all the jobs are gone. And that's what he was. He loves that the globalists, the elite, the creme de la creme, who would run the world, and that would, of course, include Barack Obama. So I absolutely think, globalists couldn't give couldn't care less about jobs of Americans. Americans actually he found them alien.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up again. But at the end of the day, he lives for the brunch. Okay, he lives for brunch.
All right, Peter. Any last minute thoughts?
I'm going to see you on Crosstalk on Sunday.
Sunday on Crosstalk. That sounds good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. It was always great fun. Thank you for all your questions and all your comments. We try to address as many as we could, and we will be here next Friday. We have an absolute commitment for Fridays. And we look forward to seeing you again next Friday. And come with all your questions, comments, criticisms, whatever. See you then. Okay. Bye.
All right. Take care.